Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate you being down here with me tonight. It took me a while to get my materials over here because the topic I have tonight is the topic of what this House has been doing to make a difference in the life of families across this country. That's the good news. And I have to confess, I'm here on kind of a good news, bad news night. The good news is, and I have them stacked over here in front of me, this is the stack of bills that this House has passed, again, to make a difference in the lives of families, to make a difference in small businesses, to grow the economy, to create jobs. The bills this House has passed that sit collecting dust in the United States Senate. That's the bad news part of tonight. Mr. Speaker, fair enough if folks think this process is broken, fair enough if folks think there's too much partisanship in Washington, but what we have here are the successes. What we have here is not the hypothetical, if only, bills. What we have here are the bills that have actually left this House and sit in the United States Senate. It's 356 bills, Mr. Speaker. 356 bills that have left this House that sit collecting dust in the Senate. We did a hashtag, Mr. Speaker, hashtag stuck in the Senate. Stuck in the Senate. We all remember that I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill, that Saturday morning cartoon. This is not a dictatorship. We had that conversation a little bit earlier this afternoon. It's not a dictatorship. It's a collaborative effort, and the House has collaborated to pass over 356 bills that have gone to the Senate to do nothing. Now, again, it's a good news, bad news day. Let me start with something that is good news. Because if folks don't believe we can get together, if folks don't believe there is opportunity for success, I can imagine how folks would give up. Not just folks here in this chamber, but folks across the country, families across the country. This, Mr. Speaker, you may remember it, H.R. 803, the Workplace Innovation and Opportunities Act. I don't know if you can see it from where you sit, Mr. Speaker. This passed the House. It passed the Senate. It's signed by the President. It's become law. This was a bill to consolidate a variety of workplace training programs. We talk so much about a trained workforce, how it is that we get Americans who may be transitioning in their life, transitioning home from Iraq or Afghanistan, transitioning from an industry that is in decline to an industry that is growing. How do we get those folks trained? And what we found, and I credit Dr. Virginia Fox with this. She is one of my colleagues here in the House. I serve with her on the Rules Committee, but she also serves on the Education and Labor Committee. And she's been working on trying to consolidate programs, to take money from programs that were not effective and move them to places that were effective. Imagine that. Imagine that. Here she is, a conservative Republican. What she was trying to do is take money from places that weren't working and put it into places where it would make a difference for moms and dads and kids. And she did it. And she did it. Now, what we passed out of the House was strong, Mr. Speaker. It was strong. We went out and we found every single program that was failing America. We brought them together, put them into a single pot, sent that over to the Senate. Now, the Senate said, no, we don't think all those programs are failing. We're not ready to move that big of a package. We want to do something smaller. They ended up consolidating about half of what we consolidated here in the House. But guess what? When you elect Rob Woodall dictator, then I get to have it my way every day. But until then, this is a collaborative effort here. The House, the Senate, the President. So we worked with the Senate, we worked out our differences, we found that package of consolidation that we could all live with, we sent it to the President, and we got his signature. That's what the American people expect. That's what my constituents expect. They expect us to work together to get things done, not sacrificing principle, not compromising on values, but finding consensus, because we all agree that American workers need help. We all agree that moms and dads in transition need to find a better way to feed their family. We can spend tax dollars better. We found a way to do that here. Golly, I call it common sense, Mr. Speaker. It's not supposed to take a rocket scientist to sort some of these issues out. It's supposed to be common sense. Did I mention hashtag stuck in the Senate, Mr. Speaker? Did I mention it? Because if I didn't, I want to mention it right now, because here's one that really gets me. I'm just talking about hiring more moms and dads. It's called the Hire More Heroes Act. Do you know it? Do you remember it, Mr. Speaker? We passed it out of this House with over 400 votes. Now, young high school students, middle school students, they might not know if they're watching tonight, Mr. Speaker, they might not know how many members there are in the House. There are 435 members in this House. And more than 400 of them said we should pass the Hire More Heroes bill. But it's stuck in the Senate. Over 400 votes voted yes. Only one voted no. So I don't want to hear about partisanship in the House. I don't want to hear about Republican this and Democratic that. 400 plus votes said let's pass this bill. Hire More Heroes Act says one of the highest rates of unemployment we have in this country are men and women in uniform coming home from overseas. And it says that we have small employers in this country because, as you know, Mr. Speaker, most of the employment in America is not driven by the big guys. It's driven by small employers. We heard from small employers in this country who said, I want to hire those veterans, but I'm worried about that 50 employee threshold that throws me into this brand new round of Obamacare regulations. Guess what this House did, Mr. Speaker? Republicans, Democrats, more than 400 out of 435 got together and they said, if you're a small business owner in America and you want to put unemployed veterans to work, but you don't because you're worried about some federal government regulation dealing with Obamacare, we will waive that regulation for you. Hire all the veterans you want to and be not afraid of federal government regulation. Think about that. Think about that. It's what I think about. It's why I ran for Congress. It's why my friends on the other side of the aisle ran for Congress, Mr. Speaker. We came to make a difference. Make a difference. Who among us doesn't want to see unemployed veterans get a job? Who among us doesn't want to see small businesses succeed? We came together, more than 400 of us, to pass the Hire More Heroes Act, but it's stuck in the Senate. Why? Why? Over 400 of us, almost every Democrat, we lost one, but every Republican, almost every one of us voted yes to make a difference for small businesses, get them the labor that they need, make a difference for veterans looking for a job. Oh, it was a good bill, Mr. Speaker. Still is. And it's stuck in the Senate. It's not stuck because we can't come to agreement on it, Mr. Speaker. It's not stuck because Republicans are intransigent. It is stuck because the Senate can't get these bills moving. Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking folks to just come together and do what I want them to do. What I'm talking about are things that we're celebrating in this institution. I'm not talking about things that squeaked through by the skin of their teeth. I'm not talking about Republican proposals that we jammed through with the might of a majority. I'm talking about common sense proposals that make a difference in people's lives. I'll give you one. How about H.R. 4414, Mr. Speaker? It's the Expatriate Health Coverage Clarification Act. It doesn't sound very exciting, does it? And you know what? It's not very exciting for about 99% of Americans. But for Americans who have to work overseas and who have seen their health insurance policies canceled, quadrupled in price, folks who struggled to find coverage at all, what this says is that, you know what? If you don't live in America, but you're working for an American company, really you can sort out your insurance needs on your own over there. If you don't live in America, you don't have to comply with all these needs, because guess what? Guess what? If you're doing business in London, the healthcare system is different. In England, if you're doing business in Paris, the healthcare system is different. In France, if you're doing business in Moscow, the healthcare system is different. In Russia, the rules we passed here won't work in those places. It's common sense. Had we not jammed that bill through Congress, that Affordable Care Act, maybe we would have gotten to that, but I don't know. It's a small group of people. We passed a solution. Let's look. 269 to 150. And I dare say those folks who voted no wouldn't say they opposed the policy. They'd say they just thought it was a symbol of undermining Obamacare in some way. They didn't want to undermine the president. I say nonsense about undermining the president. I want to make a difference in the lives of families. 92 days, Mr. Speaker. 92 days this bill has been sitting in the Senate. Now, that's a minor piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, to make a big impact, but for a small number of people. What about things that make a big impact for a large number of people? What about those things? The REINS Act, Mr. Speaker, H.R. 367, the REINS Act says, and it's a crazy bill, I'll confess, it says, before you pass a regulation, you need to consider the economic impact of that regulation. Now, while that's common sense back home in Atlanta, it may seem crazy here in Washington, D.C. Before weigh the pros and the cons to see if it's a good idea or not. Weigh those pros and the cons. It's a REINS Act because we're just out of control here with regulation, and we need to have a thoughtful conversation about it. H.R. 1105, the Small Business Capital Access and Job Preservation Act. Trying to find ways for our small businesses to get access to the capital they need in what has been incredibly tight credit markets. H.R. 2374, the Retail Investor Protection Act. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, we are passing bills. They're all here. They're all sitting on Harry Reid's desk over there in the Senate, passing bills in an effort to make a difference in people's lives. If it didn't matter, we wouldn't be interested in doing it. I don't have a bill in this stack that's about making a political statement. I don't have a bill in this stack that's about trying to be one-up on the other guy, trying to embarrass somebody, trying to call somebody out. What I have in this stack, did I mention there are 356 bills in this stack? What I have in this stack are bills that could make a difference to a struggling economy today. Today. I say today, these bills passed a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, or more. They could make a difference. They're hashtag stuck in the Senate. 356 bills. Now, I've got the great honor tonight, Mr. Speaker, not alone in this endeavor. Hadn't been alone in passing 356 bills. It has been a team sport from day one. Team sport from day one. Republicans, Democrats, folks from the North, folks from the South, folks representing families from across the country. And tonight I've got Mr. Rothfuss here, 18-month member of this institution. Came, I wager, not to make a point, but to make a difference, and has been doing that every day he's been in this chamber. I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
I thank the